Aloha and welcome back to the Awakening to the Magic of the Menstrual Cycle Summit. I am so excited to be presenting Miss Anabel Vizcarra here today. Welcome, Anabel. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I am so graced to be here. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yay. Who doesn't love to talk about menstrual health?
Exactly, right?
I'm just going to read your short bio for anybody who's not familiar with you. Mm-hmm. So Miss Anabel is an embodiment mentor and womb shaman. She teaches women how to awaken and embody their wise and wild feminine wisdom. Through her cultivated gnosis, she helps women trust their awakening process by reconnecting to their core source of wisdom, their womb. She believes that when women come back into working with their own body wisdom, they are able to transform their lives, build their queendom, and express their genius. Anabel's work is a synthesis of womb shamanism, gene keys transmission, Ayurvedic medicine, quantum physics, and epigenetics. What a great, short, little, very potent bio.
Thank you. Thank you. It's potent work. There's women's work.
It definitely is probably some of the most potent on the planet, I'd say. Especially
Absolutely.
Right with everything.
I agree.
That's so exciting to know that you're also a fellow Ayurvedic sister.
Yes, absolutely. I know I was excited to know that of your work as well, because that's actually where, for me, a lot of this work started. You know, it began with going into that Ayurvedic perspective of looking at the world through the seasons. Mm-hmm. You know, and so that kind of led me down that wormhole, and then I specialized in the studies of like women's reproductive system around the Ayurvedic, through the Ayurvedic lens, and so that was like my into this beautiful body of work that's developed around the feminine and the embodiment of the feminine power.
Beautiful. That's a really nice entrance into all of this.
Yes, it is. It is.
I have been just fascinated about everything Ayurveda since the word first entered my awareness in this lifetime. And I was just recently talking with someone about how Ayurveda feels much more like remembering than learning something new. The wisdom just feels so intuitive, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Like, yeah, of course it's like that. That makes total sense. Why does everybody not know this?
Yes, and that's, you know, and that's actually how, you know, that's a great barometer for what is true for us, you know, because obviously everybody's truth is unique to their own blueprint. But when you experience something that you're like, oh, well, you know, I don't get the all of it, but it's something about it feels true. My body remembers this because as women, we already have all this wisdom within us. And I always remind like people that I'm working with or women that I'm working with, like, I'm not telling you something that you don't know. I am simply, you know, bringing the sound forth to awaken this inside of you. And you can either accept that as your truth or not, you know, because it is very, you know, we have to honor also the cycles of truth within us that, you know, sometimes we have a certain bandwidth and we're available for certain things, and honoring this is a big part of coming to our own expression of truth. So I absolutely, like, remembrance is the healing. It is remembering who we are, you know, who we are, we're born, and why we've incarnated into this reality and what we're here to anchor as women. And specifically, you know, I suppose my talk will be about women because we're talking about menses and you know, and all that, and my work is mainly with women and awakening to these cycles within them. And so, I mean, I would love to dive straight in because I'm just excited to talk about these cycles and why they're so important.
Absolutely. Yes. Let's dive right in. I would love actually, I would love to hear a little bit about the womb shamanism piece, if you would like to share a little bit about that. Maybe like how you got into that and what that's
Yeah.
done for you.
Yeah. So, my, like I said, my journey began with Ayurveda. That was sort of like after my great humbling and redirection. I went through the portal of Ayurveda, and then through that, really woke up to the importance of the women's reproduction health and how it affects our lives and all of these things. And then I came to kind of a crux where I was going to go into a spiritual psychology program. And so I had prayed about it. I said, if this is like where I'm meant to be, just show me. I am surrendered. And that night, before I was to put my deposit in and all of those things to start that with University of Santa Monica, I actually had a dream. And in this dream, I was on my computer and I was reading about menstruation. And so I was like, oh, I woke up and I was like, oh, wow, this is so interesting. And I started Googling, sacred menstruation. And there was only one link that I found that was talking about it. And it was with the work of Saren and Azra Bertrand, who at the time were starting their apprenticeship through Fountain of Life. And so that's kind of, I said, okay, well, I suppose this is where I inquired about it. It was about to start, I think, in like 2 or 3 weeks. And they replied, and that's where it took me. So that's how I came into the womb shamanism piece of it. Now, what is womb shamanism? So womb shamanism is based on the principles, they're feminine principles of creation. And so this is, we know it as the quantum field, where it's a field that is alive with all the possibilities, that exist, that can exist. But it's also seen through the framework of our wombs as the portal of creation. So when we can access that portal within ourselves and anchor that into the womb of the earth, we are actually accessing our ancestry, our lineage wisdom, as well as our lineage shadows. But it is really going deep into the underworld of who we are and who we have been as women on the planet. And when we're able to do that, what emerges forth is the wisdom that is alive in our bodies, and how do we co-create from that sacred space that honors all of life, that honors the ecology and not just independence or, sort of like that lone wolf path, but that really returns us that we are all a sacred thread, and our color is very unique and very specific, and we all need each other to be able to weave this tapestry of remembrance and anchor this on the planet as the feminine Christ work, because this is really rooted as well in like the feminine Christ, the return of the solar feminine Christ, which is the one that gets shit done really in the world, but it's a sacred activism that emerges from that fire that is lit, that is sustained, it's nourishing, not so much the fire that is destructive and sort of seeking that justice from the world, but it's rooted in a divine justice piece that is just greater. So that's, I suppose that's the short explanation of what womb shamanism to me is. Womb shamanism itself does not have a specific lineage. This is also important to know, because it is rooted back into the shamans that have been found. I believe that the oldest shaman that's been found was a woman buried with her tools, which was about 5,000 years old. And so these were women that were working with the earth. They were working with the elements. And so that is where womb shamanism is rooted from, because we lived off the land. So we honored it in different ways. So the womb shamanism that I teach isn't just rooted in let's return to that time, but it's let's remember the juiciness and the wisdom from that, bring it into our body so we can live it in these times that is so needed, that guidance is so needed.
Definitely. Beautiful. Thank you for that. It's like, It's a healthy challenge and also such a blessing to be that vessel to take ancient wisdom and translate it for modern day times. It's really incredible, don't you think?
It's, yes, it is such a great blessing. And it sometimes, you know, just like a feminine paradox, it can seem like a curse.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's just usually when you get like caught up in the details, and then you just need to like lean back a little bit and
Trust.
the receptive feminine energy of the moment. I just wanted to touch on the piece that you were talking about, that fiery energy and it not like what's being called for right now isn't that in its destructive state, but in more like getting stuff done and life-giving. And that made me think about like the sun's heat and how that brings life and it stimulates growth and change, and it's very life-giving instead of just like a destructive fire. So it just was like noticing the correlation between that and also what you just said about the solar
Mm-hmm.
solar Christ feminine.
Feminine Christ. Yes,
Yeah.
the solar feminine Christ energies. And yes, you're absolutely right, because that that same sun that we see and that gives, you know, that we're sustained through its light is the same sun that actually lives in our bellies, you know, and you can find this in so many lineages, you know, that talked about the Dantian, the 1 point, the, you know, that belly, that solar plexus, right? And then also it's found in the body of the earth, you know, because at its core, it also holds the sun, you know, it holds its heat. And so we are made of light. We are light beings. You know, the reason why we're in this density and in this flesh form, we are slowed down light particles. You know, we're sort of these clusters, right? And I really love to think of myself as a sort of like a digestive cell on this planet, right? And it's like I am here to sort of, you know, munch through all the shadows that are here and be able to allow that to pass through me in a more refined version of what that is, because all of our shadows are actually gifts, you know. They are, and now this is it's sort of why it's important to do our shadow work, is because that's where most of our light is trapped. It is trapped in these conditioning beliefs and systems, you know, and that not by our own fault or doing, but many times also inherited patterns of survival, of lack, of competition, of greed. So as a woman, I really do believe, and this is where it can sometimes feel like a curse, you know, because it's like, wow, I have to move through all these layers of myself, but these are layers that we agreed to come and to clear, right? And to also reclaim, because there's a reclamation, and really, I do believe that this is the reclamation of the feminine, is to be able to dive into those deep, dark places and bring that true light, you know, that not the shiny light that you see out there, like, oh, self-love and, oh, you know, like all that, like hair and nails and that self-care, like that's a piece of it. And it is important, right? Because adornment is a beautiful way to honor your sacred vessel and your sacred temple. However, the true self-care and the true self-love is anchored in the light that is in the darkness, you know, that can really ignite our cell remembrance, that activates codes within us that we're carrying, that are dormant and that are needed in order for us to remember what we are here to anchor. And when we do that, you know, we kind of move away from the whole comparison and tell me how to do this and tell me how to run my business and, you know, and what am I here to do? And all that self-doubt dissipates because you're now connected to your source that is informing your path and your calling, rather than let me look around and see who can give me my calling and my purpose, you know. Because as a woman, I really feel like most of it, and I don't think I've ever met a woman that didn't at her core feel and believe that she was here to contribute to the planet in some way, you know, whether that was through children, through projects, and you know, and I think that's also another beautiful piece to remember, is that as a woman, our creative center and that sacred fire that I'm speaking of, it's not just to make babies. You know, that is the sort of physical 3D printer creation that we can see and moves around. And it's a beautiful sacred blessing. I myself have a 14-year-old boy, but it is not what determines the power of the woman's creation. You know, there are so many women that are here to birth projects and to birth movements and to birth all these paradigm shifts and changes that are not necessarily going to be walking in a human body. So that's really important, because I do run into a lot of women that feel like that the value as a woman is determined by our ability to birth. And that is a societal dislocation of what our womanhood is. And it is a way that we are oppressed in society as well, and that we are moved away and divided from our power.
Definitely. Yeah. That's a really good piece to bring up, and something that I have been tuning into more and more the more I get into this work and really get more connected with my cycle and that creative energy, and like tuning into what it is that wants to be birthed through me right now, that isn't a child. Because women are such powerful channels and receivers of visions and all kinds of beneficial information that is really given to us to help better humanity and the planet as a whole. And I've talked about this before, about how, you know, like the menstrual part of the cycle is the dreaming and receiving part, and the ovulatory part is the birthing, not necessarily a human, but allowing what wants to be birthed through you to come through you in whatever form that is, whether that's a movement or a program or a healing center or just any idea, really. It doesn't matter how big or small. It's just, what is it that's talking to you? What is it that's wanting to be called forth through you? Because I know there is that same divine feminine voice calling to every woman that has things that want to be birthed through her. It's just a matter of paying attention and being aware enough that there is something that wants to come through you that can't come through anyone else. It's like unique to you. It's from the divine, but it's also a part of your own unique makeup as the channel for it, you know?
Absolutely. Well, we all carry our own soul song, you know, like our own soul print. And so whatever we choose to say yes to, and now we don't have to say yes to it either, you know, but whatever we choose to say yes to is going to be infused with that soul print. And that's why when we're creating from that space, there is no one can take your work, no one can compete with you, because there is that sacred and special soul print, you know. And I think we get so caught up also, you know, in like, is it a big project or a little project? But know that every little step is leading. It's a journey, you know. It is not a destination, it is a journey. Like, I know that I will be birthing things until the day I die, because that is, I am open to being that expansiveness. And the more that we allow and surrender and expand, the more that we are also creating space for, you know. And as a woman, it is our natural given birthright that we embody the seasons of life within our bodies, you know, from death to birth to conception to gestation. All of those things are our creation blueprint that we have access to. And what makes me really sad is that so many of us do not know this, you know. And this is why I'm so passionate about this work, because I have really witnessed, not only from myself, knowing how it changed my life, but also from other women, of when we begin to see how creation, how we can come into alliance with creation and become these powerful co-creators through our bodies, it just changes everything. It changes your reality, because you now can see that I'm not little me doing this by myself. You know, what I have to do is actually work on little me saying yes to the bigness of what I am being offered, you know, what I have an opportunity to embody. And, you know, and this, we're doing with the best way to start doing this, you know, because also this could get so big and like, oh, wow, yeah, that sounds amazing. But like, how do I make this more practical in my life? You know, like, how do I start working on this? And this is where we move into realizing that, you know, not only our bleeding time is important, because most of us have no choice but to acknowledge that, because we bleed, we have a physical symptom, but to realize that we have 4 cycles that are moving through our bodies every month. And so it is ridiculous to think that as a woman, we're going to have one mood or one state throughout our month. It's just crazy, right?
It's
to think that. to also agree that there is something wrong with me because I have this ebb and flow that moves through me. And what happens is when we want to deny that, it actually becomes very jagged. It becomes worse, you know, through our hormonal responses and reactions. And then what happens? You go to the doctor, and what does the doctor want to do? They want to numb you. They want to numb you through prescription drugs or through birth control so that you can, you know, balance your hormones. And so, and I'm not saying that the medical piece is not important, because I do believe that that has a place. But what I am saying is that on a general consensus, women has given up her rights around her ownership of her menstrual cycle throughout the month, you know. And so, and each phase has such a beautiful, pristine, it's a portal to a different you. And so this is where we are actually coming to allowing the bigness of who we are. You're too much, Anabel. Yes, I am. Because how could I embody the consciousness inside of this body that's only 5'6", you know? And so, yes, I am too much. And that doesn't, it doesn't make it a destructive thing. It makes it what I make of it, you know, and what I allow others to convince me that it is. But when I know that, hey, this week, you know, I'm happier naturally, you know, I can start working with that. When I know that, you know, like PMS, right? Like that's I call it the time of the dragons, because that's when your dragon body really becomes alive. And that's where all the filters are dropped away. And that's where you can see things with the no BS filter. And so you're calling it that, you know, and so whatever throughout the month you haven't dealt with, or you've, you know, violated your own boundaries, that's the time that it's going to come up. And so, you know, we don't want to, when we're not aware of it, we're lashing out, right? We're making decisions from this space. Like, you know what, screw this. I'm tired of this. And this is when we stand up for ourselves. But what happens the next week when everything cools off? And then you're feeling guilty about what you did during that week, you know, because it was coming from that fiery place that had, you know, no filter. And now we feel guilty, we feel shame, you know, so then we shrink again. And it's a cycle that we get, like loops that we get stuck in. So when we understand that this week, and you can jump in whenever you want, because I can talk about this like all day, but I just feel that this is so important, you know, like so when we can start to see, okay, this is when my hormones are this way, and, you know, I can start to work with that. I understand that this is a time to observe. It is not the time to believe anything that I say about myself, because I'm going to be highly critical, you know, and I just observe, I take notes, you know, I'm like, okay, there's the dragon again, you know, because these are things that I want to take into my menstruation, my bleeding time, and I can menstruate the energetics of it and then decide what is it that I want to do moving forward into this new month or this new phase. And then taking the sacred action or taking right action from a rooted and mature place, not from that, you know, dragon place that is just going to burn everything down, right? So it's really, and I really do feel that it allows us to come into a greater emotional intelligence maturity, you know, to really embody that grace, right? Not the grace that's like a doormat and just, you know, saying being a yes person, but actually the grace that can be fierce, you know, that when it is time to stand up for myself, I am not going to back down because this is what's true for me. But when that's not rooted in our deepest truth, it is very easy to get knocked off balance. So.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And you brought so many really important pieces up. One of them being, and that I really love to instill in the women that I work with, is that I actually just, I just made a post about this in a newsletter about how your emotions are messengers, and just like talking about that, like pre-menstrual phase, for instance, when all of the filters are dropped and it's like the no BS, like you said, like understanding the purpose of the emotion anger in your life, for instance, and what that's doing for you is helping to reestablish boundaries in your life, which is ultimately helping protect you, which you need, and just helping to remind women that those emotions are there for a reason, and you don't necessarily need to fly off the handle and freak out on everyone. And if you're doing that, then that means that you really need to figure out how to create some space in your life, especially when you're menstruating, to sit and be with what's coming up for you. Because I feel so often, I mean, I've seen this in my own mother and my own reality, and in myself, like feeling like those bitchy emotions and feelings that come up, and not knowing what purpose they serve, and just immediately feeling bad, like you're just supposed to shove them down and not feel that way and like deny them, when they're going to continuously come up and show up until you start paying attention to what they're getting your attention for. And it's not ever to really be destructive, but it's really important, which is why they're so strong, so that you start paying attention. And it's usually always a call from deep within you to come home to yourself, to honor yourself, to stop saying yes to things that don't feel good to you, and to start like flexing those no muscles, you know, that empower you, like really getting in touch with your truth and what feels true for you, and knowing that it's okay if it's not true for everyone else, but paying attention to like how you feel, what your body says about things, whether it feels good to you or not, and slowly starting to say no to things and start saying yes to you, and like establish those boundaries. Because I feel like culturally nobody has known what the hell boundaries are. Our parents didn't know what boundaries are. Their parents didn't know what boundaries were. I have been seeing that concept of boundaries as like a new concept for the collective, and as a really important piece to an evolved civilization, is having the boundaries, knowing what your right relationship is with yourself, so you can have right relationship with the world around you and other people. And that includes being able to say no and not feel bad about it, you know?
Absolutely. Yes. And that no can be so powerful, right? Because it's something that we continually override, you know, just like we we override saying yes to receiving in so many ways as well, you know, and it's so interesting how that works. You know, it's that paradox. Is the harder that you the harder time you have saying no to people, it's the harder yes you're having trouble saying for yourself, you know, and allowing for yourself. So
yeah, that's a really there's a really good piece, and they are totally interconnected, and those are like such huge pieces in the wounding of the collective female pain body right now that I think is coming to light in every woman's reality to be faced, because I don't think know how to say yes all the time. We're like such natural givers and nurturers and so strong-willed that like not doing everything and letting yourself receive help, support, love, gifts, whatever, like that's really uncomfortable for a lot of women.
Yes,
Just as
absolutely.
out how to do with saying no also. So that's really, it's good that you brought both of those up. We got to work on being able to say yes to receiving and saying no to giving more.
Yeah, and even just having that awareness of like, whenever I don't honor my no, I am not open to my yes, you know, and that's like I feel like that's a key in there, you know, because we kind of need that extra support to be able to say the no when we haven't been taught how to do that, or we ourselves feel bad and feel guilty for it, you know. And then I also, you know, what you were saying about that sacred anger, you know, that anger piece of it, it's so important to know that anger is such an ally for us, because it does create it. You know what anger does? It's an energy that will move us out of the victim or martyr oppressed state. It will move our bodies like physically, you know. This is why it's like a charge, because it moves us out of that, so that we're able to create momentum to support ourselves out of it. But what happens is that when we don't know that, you know, culture and society have been really, really good, and our parents have been really good about teaching us our relationship with anger. And so we've taken that on, and we learn this, you know, around our beginning of our teens, how our anger is received. So if you grew up in a home where your anger wasn't allowed, or you were told it's not okay to be angry, you have to be a good girl, you know, that, you know, good girls don't get mad, they don't yell like that, they don't say bad words, all of those things, they get embedded in our emotional body. And then we kind of identify anger as being something bad that we don't want to engage in. And it's like when we feel angry, then, oh, I'm a good person. Or, you know, something that I hear a lot is, that was not me. That's not me. No, it's like, that is you. It is a disowned part of you. And the relationship with anger is important to know that in its essence, it's a beautiful energy. It's the expression of it that makes it destructive or constructive. And most of us have witnessed anger in a destructive form. Therefore, we kind of correlate them. You know, we correlate being angry with someone's going to get hurt or something bad's going to happen, when actually, when we're aware of it, and we can feel that, oh wow, I am really freaking triggered right now, like I just want to punch something, whatever it is. It's like, instead of trying to move myself out of that state, I can channel that energy into like dancing, like wild dancing, or going for a run, or, you know, and really inquiring like, what is the information? Because like you said, you know, emotion is information. And I do say, like, you know, this is why it's so it can be so confusing when you're told to follow your, you know, like, how does your body feel, you know, and all of these things. This is a process of cultivation, because at first your body is very conditioned to responding to what we've been living. And so it's a dismantling of these false beliefs and programs that have been placed on us, so that we can start inquiring what is the authentic feel. And so when we can learn to pause and to cultivate between the impulse and the action, if we can create that middle space there, that's the middle space that informs what's the information in it. You know, and so many times we don't get it because it's like we feel the impulse and then we react or we repress. And so the information is lost.
Yes. And that space that you're talking about, that space is what's so important, because that is where the true inner alchemy comes into play, to receive that really triggering energy. And instead of just immediately passing that on to someone else for them to feel triggered, you sit with it and you allow it to be processed and refined and filter out like the truth of it before you share your perspective. So like, instead of just blindly reacting, you can actually come from like a calm, grounded space, even if what you're communicating is challenging and uncomfortable.
Yes.
Just to be able to diffuse the charge of the emotion within yourself is such a huge piece of self-mastery. And I just wanted to add that culturally, as a society, as we are learning what boundaries are and how to have them, because I know it's really new for some people. Mm-hmm. And when you didn't even, I remember at one point when I didn't even know what a boundary was. I remember situations where my boundaries were being violated, but I had no idea that's what was happening. And when I started to really integrate that concept of boundaries and started learning how to establish them in my own reality, it's not like a linear physical structural boundary, like a wall that you just build up and okay, you're good. It's like, it's a muscle that you have to continuously flex and cultivate, and your boundaries will be continually pushed on by the outer world for your whole life, and not even necessarily in as intensive or violating ways, but it just really comes back to what feels true for you. Just as simply as if you were invited to go out and socialize, for instance, and you needed to be up early for an interview or something really important, mm-hmm. Where's your boundary at? What feels appropriate for you? And it's going to be different in every moment. If you hadn't gone out and socialized in months and you really needed the medicine of the socializing and the community, it might be beneficial for you to go out, even though you're not going to get as much sleep, but knowing that you need that piece of communal connection, it might be appropriate for you. But if you're full on socializing, maybe it would be best for you to stay at home and practice some self-discipline and make sure that you're fully rested. You know what I mean? So it's very circumstantial, and it's ever changing, and it's not ever going to be something that you can just put into place and it's done. It's always something that requires refinement, especially the more that we mature and evolve. Then your boundaries require an upgrading. What used to be okay might not be okay with you anymore, the transitioning to motherhood, for instance, that probably brings up a whole lot of things that aren't okay that used to be okay, and vice versa. So it's ever evolving, and it's always going to be something that requires your attention. However, once you really root deep down into your core and you cultivate that relationship with your own truth and sovereignty, it makes it a lot easier to gauge where your boundaries need to be. Yes. Not nearly as messy and difficult as it is when you're first figuring out how to say no and have boundaries. You get it gets easier, you get better at it, but it's not something that ever goes away. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes, it's beautifully said. It is, boundaries are fluid, you know, and I think that because woman, for me, when you are an embodied woman, you are a mystery. Like, you're just an evolving mystery. And so to put fixed boundaries on evolving mystery, it just doesn't make sense. So it is, as we evolve, our boundaries evolve with us as well, you know, because they are, and I like to imagine boundaries as sort of a womb, you know, and it's like, some of my projects need certain boundaries, but those boundaries are upholding that womb space for it to be created, for it to be gestated, you know, and sometimes that needs to be a little bit tighter. Sometimes it can be a little bit more relaxed, and you know, and it comes down to how aligned am I to the truth of what I am standing for. So if that job interview is aligned with, you know, with my truth, and I am like, yes, I'm going to show up for this, and, you know, everything else sort of has to honor the boundaries for that. But I really feel too that, you know, boundaries, it comes down to, do I feel depleted, or am I nourished by this? You know, is this depleting for me? Does this take my life force? Or am I nourished and nurtured by this exchange? Because like you said, it's natural for us to be givers and to want to help everyone. And, you know, and we're over giving all the time. And a lot of times that's what actually moves us away from our truth and our own purpose and calling, because we don't have enough life force to be calling forth the great work. You know, we're busy giving it away to toxic relationships or lovers, or, you know, or putting up with irreverent attitudes, you know, and so our life force is being sort of leaked everywhere in that sense. So the boundaries serve to be able to contain that power, to be able to contain that life force, and invite, you know, things of higher frequency into our space.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for adding that. I love the way that you use that as like a womb analogy. That is that's the point of boundaries, is to protect you so that you can have a sovereign experience, and so that everyone else can have a sovereign experience.
Yes, and in that, co-create, live together, get along, you know, cooperate, collaborate.
Yeah, and I think that gets a lot easier when you have boundaries and you're around other people who have boundaries, because, I mean, the truth is, we're in this collective soup of energy, but every single one of us is having our own individual experience and our own individual reality bubble. And we're not all supposed to have the same experience. We're not supposed to agree on everything. We're not supposed to have resonance with everything. And it's okay that we're different. We're supposed to be different. And when you know that, and you're rooted in your own truth, and you realize that it is healthy and natural for everyone to have their own experiences, there's not nearly as much desire to like fight against stuff. When you realize that I'm a sovereign being, you're a sovereign being, you're totally allowed to have your own experience, and I'm allowed to have mine, whether we agree or not, there's like no desire to fight with any of it or try and force it to change. When you really like embody your own sovereignty, you know.
Absolutely, yes. And that's, you know, I love the work of Adyashanti. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but, you know, one of the things that he says is that we are never truly free until we allow others to be free in their own decisions. You know, whenever we're trying to change or let me convince you my way is the way, you know, it's like, that's not true freedom. because true freedom is being able to live and be in that sovereignty, and understanding that everybody is here, you know, to have their sovereign experience. And now I think that the thing that I know for me used to trigger me around that was that I was saying, okay, well, you know, if I'm here to be sovereign and you're here to be sovereign and the world's a mess, like nothing's ever going to change because, you know, we're just, but it's understanding that, you know, and this is why I love seeing, you know, two things I want to say about that. You know, quantum consciousness, womb consciousness, there is not one fixed experience. You know, there is only perception. So whatever perception you are embodying is the reality that you are going to be living, right? So this is the quantum field where everything is possible. But inside of that as well is seeing even how the earth or ecosystem works, is that not everything's the same. You know, the trees have their part, the dirt has its part, the ocean has its part, and yet everything is connected. Everything affects another. So it's honoring, because if a tree decided, you know what, I'm not going to be the tree, I'm going to be an ocean today, you know, it's not honoring its true nature. So it wouldn't exist in the ecology as it is meant to. And I really can relate to that as a woman, is that we all have our unique divine blueprint. And when we really focus on the work being discovering that and revealing that within ourselves, then we find our little our well, it's not little, but like our space to inhabit and to live by and to express. And that's where change and true shifts happen, because you know, we're sort of taking our part, and what is my job in this ecology? It is this, you know, and then someone else takes their part in that ecology. And so it begins to move us into the intelligence of the hive mind that I speak a lot in my work. It's because you see birds, how they fly, and sometimes they look like an organism. They look like one organism, and yet they're all individual in their existence. And so that is the capacity for humans to embody. But we do carry that, you know, which is, again, we come to the paradox of asking, you know, questions of who am I, what am I here to do, you know, all that, while it wants to move us deeper into our own inner experience and refinement. We tend, and the world is designed this way by patriarchal systems, to take us out of going inward and have us find our purpose and our blueprint outside of us. You know, it's like, where's my purpose? How do I find my purpose? You know, we're looking out there, where really you have to return inward and find it there. And that's where, you know, anchoring into the earth, working with the cycles, really awakening what it's like to be part of this ecology that we are in, that we are not separate from. And so, yeah, that the interconnectedness of that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that actually, it makes me think about, I just kind of like dream about the planet and how it will function and look when humans everywhere are truly fully awake to what they came here to do and their purpose in the whole, as an organism of the whole body of the planet, and what our right relationship with it is, and what we're really supposed to be doing. Like, it's like that's like the microcosm of the macrocosm that I think about when it comes to our bodies, and how we're like filled with cells and tiny organisms, and how when you actually turn your consciousness onto your body and the intelligence of it, and you start talking to your body and listening to it and talking to your cells, how that like changes the whole thing, and your entire system begins to function in a much more cohesive way. It's like, I call it the smart body. It's like you activate your smart body and like infuse your physical form with a more expanded level of consciousness. And then that's when like true like healing miracles are like commonplace is when you activate that consciousness within yourself. And in that regards, we're like a little microcosm of the macrocosm of the whole planet that we're on. So to just ponder the thought of how the whole planet would be if and when human beings are truly awake and behaving and working together in a cohesive system instead of like all individually and like against each other, like how miraculous and amazing and beautiful the planet will be once we're all awakened to that point.
Absolutely. Can you imagine that? That's a really beautiful dream seed to ponder, you know, and to water with our inquiry and our curiosity. What would that look like? What would that feel like? Because I feel like that's also important, you know, that feeling, right? Like when you tune into that, it's like what it does for your body as well, and the chemistry in your body. It's like begins to help remember, like, yes, this is a possibility, you know, even though it may seem impossible to everyone else right now, but that dream seed is there. And that's our job to, in a way, water those dream seeds that we feel may not make sense to anyone, because again, they're in a quantum consciousness field and they're not made manifest yet. But that is what we can do when we can embody the power of our bodies and of our wisdom. And you know, I like I call my community, because I always talk about my body like it's my community, and it's my Anabel. You know, this is a community of cells that I can lead, that I can nurture and take care of. And you know, and that also helps me be mindful as the queen of this queendom, that I want to be a benevolent, just queen, you know, in what I eat and the thoughts and what I digest, you know, reading and news and just what I tell myself, because every community has a different bandwidth, right? So we want to cultivate that and be able to, like you said, come into a cohesive state. And we can do that when we are really rooted in that center of not the external, but the internal landscape, and being informed from that place.
Definitely. Yeah, I see the world very green with lots of art made out of the landscape.
Wow.
Like just the way that trees and flowers and everything could be planted to create a freaking masterpiece that just would like delight any eyes that fall upon it. That's like one of the things that I see all over the planet when I tune into that dream seed. And I love daydreaming about those types of things. So okay, so I know we're gonna have to wrap it up soon.
Yeah.
That was a conversation. And I'm so glad that it ended up us being talking about boundaries, because that's such an important piece that is really challenging for a lot of people. I mean, it's a challenge for me sometimes. I feel like it's a challenge sometimes for everyone. So
yes,
I'm really
absolutely
on that. And before we go, I wish I could talk to you all day.
Right, it's like these things are just so ripe, and you know, and I want to say that before we even wrap this up, is that, you know, I really feel at the beginning, in December, I had this quite potent revelation and vision into this decade being a decade of miracles, you know. And so when you said that field where miracles existed, it is about merging spirit and matter, because that's what's been disconnected, spirituality and science, you know, and there's been that divide. And so now, as a woman, I really feel that we're in these bodies to be bridgers of this wisdom, you know, to bring that ancient wisdom and that ancient knowing that we have in our bodies, in our bones. And also, how do we walk this path in this reality that we are in, that we chose to incarnate in? Because that's where we find like what the strength that it takes to create those boundaries, you know, because when I am rooted in that, for example, I'm very clear about what my boundaries are with my son, you know, or with other people, the way they treat my son. And so that's the same way that I want to know what my boundaries are. You know, this is what's okay and what's not okay when it comes to how I move in the world, or how someone talks to me, or, you know, their behaviors. And that's, I feel that so many times we allow things that we wouldn't allow to be done to someone we love. We allow them to be done to us because we're not aligned with that true core value, and really living from that powerful place, that it's not an arrogant self-worth of like, you know, it's not pride. It is that, like, you wouldn't do that to a sacred space, you know,
Right.
you wouldn't do that to something that you held really sacred. And for me, like my son, like there's things that I will not allow around him or done to him, because he is sacred to me. He is my responsibility. I am his guardian. And the same way, I am the guardian of this vessel, and I am the guardian of this work, and I will do the same for it, you know? And so it's boundaries are, I feel like they're just such a core piece. And like you said, they're always evolving, but the more that we can become aware of where we need to adjust them, it can just really help us thrive.
Yes, definitely. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's something that that's a piece that I use to try and help people understand the way that they need to care for themselves is, how do you care for a loved one? Do that for you.
Yes.
It helps them like understand the concept better. And it's so easily missed for us unless somebody brings to our attention like this. Beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for this transition. I would love, before we get off this call, for you to just mention a little bit about services that you offer if somebody wants to get in contact with you.
Yeah, so if you're, thank you. So if you're curious about working with me in a deeper, more personal way, you can visit my website. All my offerings are on there, and that's www.anabelvizcarra.com. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm sure Angel will share the details. And then also, do you want to share about the PDF or the offering, or?
Yeah. So you have like a cycle?
Yes, it's a PDF. It's called Optimizing Your Menstrual Cycle, and so it just gives you an overview of the 4 cycles of the menstrual cycle that we talked about, the 4 phases of it. And this is really optimal, especially if you're working with boundaries, because this will give you insight into what are the best weeks to have the heart open conversations, or which are the best weeks that, you know, you need that sacred no and rage and fire. What are the days so that you can start to get in tune with what your body is expressing, and really using that as an edge, because I really do believe that this is an edge that we have as women, you know, and knowing when should I be paying attention to my dreams, you know, when should I be even dating, you know, when should I say yes to socializing, because we do have aspects of our month that we are not necessarily the most sociable beings, you know, we need to be a little bit more inward, or we're not, also our pheromones, like when are our pheromones really flowing, you know, that's when we want to be dating, that's when we want to, you know, and how do we choose our partners, you know, there's just so much information in this, because did you know that actually how we choose our partners depends on what phase of the month we're in? This is why some days you love your partner, and some days you're like, what the heck am I doing with this guy, you know, or woman. So it's important to be in tune with these things, and this PDF will give you some insight to get started on working with that. It has some mantras in there for each phase, and also some questions for inquiry. And if you have, share with me, you know, if you have any questions or any comments, or In regards to it, I am here. You can find me here, or find me through Angel and her work and her page, and I'll be delighted to connect. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for gifting that to the audience. That sounds really very useful. I'm be excited to look through that myself.
Yes, and it's fun.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angel. Thank you, and thank you to everyone tuning in.
Thank you too. And thank you to everyone tuning in. Anabel, you have a beautiful rest of your day. And everyone else have a beautiful rest of their day. And I will keep in touch on both ends. Okay, aloha.